So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the BBC chairman helped to broker or connect Boris Johnson with a gentleman who was Boris Johnson's second cousin, a multimillionaire. Basically, helped to guarantee Boris Johnson an 800k loan facility. And this is madness that the BBC chairman was involved in this. He wasn't the BBC chairman at the time, but he was then put in that position, I think, by Boris Johnson. And it is madness. Genuinely, this whole story is madness. So you have Gabriel Pogrund. He's saying he spoke to the BBC about the story, revealing its chairman, Richard Sharp, helped arrange a guarantee for a six-figure loan for Boris Johnson, then Prime Minister. So we had a Prime Minister who was in debt, potentially, to a foreign businessman. Why did this foreign businessman offer Boris Johnson this loan? We don't know. Why he was even allowed to take up this loan? We don't know. And this is like Trump levels of nonsense. Genuinely might be even above Trump levels of nonsense, I'll be honest. So the loan was given by Sam Blythe, who was the guarantor for the credit facility of up to 800,000. So we don't even know who gave the loan, because if you're the guarantor, you're basically guaranteeing the loan will be paid back. So we don't know who actually gave Boris Johnson the overdraft money. Johnson benefited from the backing of Sam Blythe, a Canadian millionaire businessman in the education sector. So we don't even know what Sam Blythe got out of this either, given that he works in the education sector. He's a millionaire. Did he get some sort of links to British education minister? We don't know. And there are a lot of question marks over this. Johnson and his family also believed to have stayed in a holiday villa owned by Blythe in the Dominican Republic. So clearly, it's more than these things were not declared. We didn't know who Johnson was, who was funding these kind of holidays for Johnson, but we know he stayed at a villa owned by his cousin, which I don't think was declared to Parliament. Like, this is genuine madness right here. Johnson is understood to have used the credit facility from February 2021. We don't know when the end date was, but he didn't draw down the full amount, so he wasn't in £800,000 worth of debt in this credit facility. But evidently, by the looks of things, he did use it. So this story is mad. So this guy here works or owns Blythe Education, a Canadian private education company founded by Sam Blythe. Based in Toronto, Blythe Academy is a chain of private secondary schools and academic credit programs in Canada and abroad. We don't know exactly what Blythe got out of this, but he was not the person who gave the loan. That's important to remember here. So we have Sam Blythe, a Canadian, a person who made his money in the Canadian education sector, but more importantly, we have the BBC chairman essentially helping Boris Johnson get a loan of up to £800,000 from a question mark character, someone we don't know yet. Genuinely going to look like the insane guy from that movie, with all the lines. But Labour have referred Johnson to one of the parliamentary watchdogs. So this from Sky News.
Breaking news now, and Labour has reported Boris Johnson to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards over allegations that the BBC chairman Richard Sharp helped the former Prime Minister to arrange a guarantee on a loan of up to £800,000. That was just weeks before Boris Johnson selected him for his current job.
So what do we have here? Boris Johnson, and these people are friends, right? Boris Johnson will say he's a friend, blah, 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 right? And we'll talk about that in a second. We have a situation where Boris Johnson, this gentleman here, Richard Sharp, helped broker a £800,000 loan to Boris Johnson, a credit facility, whatever you want to call it, right? And he was then made the chairman of the BBC. Now, you can argue that's cronyism, and that's a very, very strong argument. I would probably agree with you. That sounds like cronyism. He helped you out. Now you're helping him to get a specific job role. And then we'll talk about the role specifically of the BBC. But speaking of Richard Sharp, he donated £400,000 to the Conservative Party. He was an advisor to Boris Johnson whilst Johnson was the Mayor of London. So clearly these two had a long, long friendship. Commentators had observed that his friendship with Sunak would help him lead negotiations with the government over the future of the BBC's licence fee. So maybe that's not the worst thing, but the fact is he was or is a Conservative donor, donated almost a cool £500,000, and he has very strong links with Boris Johnson. And he worked for JP Morgan. And we don't know what this man's political beliefs are, but given the fact that Johnson selected him whilst he was Mayor of London, we can assume he's probably got centre-right, maybe right-wing beliefs. We don't know. Madness, the son of a baron madness, an absolute madness. And getting Boris Johnson's sister to tell us that Boris Johnson has done nothing wrong is a bold way to address the problems the BBC is facing. Why Laura Kuenssberg thought it was a good idea to get Boris Johnson's sister to come defend him on the BBC show shows how stupid Laura Kuenssberg is, but also the BBC as a whole. I don't care that Johnson's sister has the accreditation of journalist. She's got probably the same journalistic credentials and potential as Nadine Dorries. They seem to defend Boris Johnson in the same way. And, Johnson's sister, Rachel Johnson, is blaming Simon Case. Simon Case, who we'll speak about in a few minutes, because he's very interesting. So she says Simon Case seems to be the linchpin. Journalist Rachel Johnson suggests the country's most senior civil servant, Simon Case, has questions to answer about the claims that the chairman of the BBC helped her brother Boris Johnson secure a loan. Surely the question mark should be over Boris Johnson, who needed a loan. Right, who needed a loan from foreign businessmen. That should be the real question, not just Simon Case's role in this. And if we look at the role here, the holder of the position of chairman of the BBC bears responsibility for the corporation and is required to uphold its impartiality and political neutrality. So we know he's already failed there by allowing people like Carrie Johnson. Oh, sorry, not Carrie Johnson. That's his wife. Rachel Johnson onto BBC programmes. He's also allowed the hiring of people like Robbie Gibbs, who has done his absolute best to seemingly decimate Newsnight to the point where their three top team of John Soper wasn't Newsnight, but the duo, which is Emily Matlis and Lewis Goodall, left the BBC, amongst others. Victoria Derbyshire was apparently on the way out to join Channel 4. I think she was then given the role at Newsnight. He's not done a good job here, and I think there's been a lot of interference from into the political hosts that they have, to the point where Andrew Marr seems to have gotten a new lease of life since leaving the BBC. That man, I thought it was down to health conditions. He kind of just couldn't do his job properly, but no, it's the BBC that seemingly did him in. But he's back and he's quite good. Sharp did not disclose his involvement in Johnson's finances to the panel, nor did he inform the BBC, and the matter was not disclosed during his pre-appointment hearing before the House of Commons Select Committee. So no doubt the House of Commons Select Committees are going to drag him back in and ask him questions. The government's own application form explicitly says you cannot be considered for a public appointment if you fail to declare any conflict of interest. It also tells candidates to report any issues in your personal or professional history that could, if you are appointed, be misconstrued, cause embarrassment, or cause public confidence in the appointment to be jeopardised. And I think he would fall under that last point, given that he helped Boris Johnson to get that £800,000 loan, right? And then he was made chairman of the BBC. Now, you could argue that maybe he wasn't given that role at the BBC. Maybe it was based on some credentials that he picked up at JP Morgan or wherever. But in my opinion, the optics of this are very, very bad. And he would fall under that last point there. And that makes his position, in my opinion, untenable. This whole situation stinks. Downing Street denies the appointment of Richard Sharp as BBC chairman as an example of cronyism. Prime Minister spokesperson said there are processes in place to ensure that these appointments are done properly. That was followed in this instance. Was it followed in this instance? Because clearly that is not the case. In my opinion, that is not the case. And if anyone wants to argue in the comments, argue with me in the comments. I dare you. I double dare you. Because this is very, very dodgy, especially given that they've been referred to one of the parliamentary watchdogs over this. It seems very sus. A bit more here from Gabriel Pogrund, saying he understands that Boris Johnson is not seeking to deny that Richard Sharp was involved in talks about the loan. He is not disputing that Sharp introduced his guarantor to Simon Case. So clearly Simon Case was definitely aware of this situation. And, he allowed this to happen. He advised the Prime Minister potentially that this was okay. Former Prime Minister is denying Sharp had detailed knowledge of his personal finances. The problem is, a lot of people knew Boris Johnson has financial problems. He has a lot of wealth, but he also has a lot of divorces, which is problematic. A lot of children to pay for. We don't know how many children. And he's also very frivolous. Note the gold wallpaper in 10 Downing Street. So the fact is, should I say 11 Downing Street? The point is he's very bad with financial management. So him having access to this credit facility and also using this credit facility means that someone had leverage over our Prime Minister. And he was very vulnerable because it could have been leaked that Johnson owes people money, and we don't know who he owed money to. We know that he was reliant on donors whilst he was in Downing Street as well. This is a very, very untenable situation here, and there's a lot we don't know about, and so Johnson needs to be dragged in front of select committee hearings. You've got the BBC chairman asked for conflict of interest review, so he's saying he wants this situation investigated. Sharp says the BBC board will review any potential conflicts of interest he may have amid scrutiny over his links with Boris Johnson. Sharp said he had not been involved in making a loan, a guarantee, or arranging any finances. He may not have been, but he did connect these people up, so clearly he was aware of a situation that was happening. In a statement, he apologised to staff, calling the row a distraction for the organisation, which he regrets. He said he had never hidden his long-standing relationship with the former PM. He never did, but evidently it looks like he was involved in this loan guarantee, and that's massively problematic here. Clearly people were aware of how bad Johnson's financial position was. And this from Simon Coates, I know I cited in my last video, but there's a lot in this jaw-dropping story by Gabriel Pogrund. But with the Nadim Zahawi affair, Sam Coates is left baffled at the Royal Simon case, who is still a cabinet secretary. What did he know and what did he try and stop? What boundaries did he set? Because the role of cabinet secretary is to is to advise the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister on policy, process and propriety. And propriety is the key here, because propriety means conformity to conventionally accepted standards of behaviour or morals. Standards and morals, is it moral for a Prime Minister to owe a foreign businessman almost up to £1 million, right? And that's just one businessman Boris Johnson could owe money to. We don't know what other loans he was offered or got. There's so many question marks over this entire story. The Simon Case was involved in this. I think Simon Case might have been involved in Partygate, where the rules were broken. How's that for morals? He was involved potentially in the Nadim Zahawi thing, where he knew about Zahawi's conflicts of interest with HMRC potentially, and he did nothing. There are so many problems here. And this from Peter Jukes here, saying all of these stories are coming out now because Johnson supporters are briefing against Zahawi and Braverman, so Sunak supporters are dumping their info on Johnson. So here you have a massive briefing war to kick off the year of Team Zahawi and Braverman, which I haven't seen a lot of leaks about Braverman, I'll be honest, so I need to keep my eye out clearly for that. But it's a battle of cabinet ministers who have a lot of dirt on each other, and it's interesting because Simon Case is the linchpin of this. He's aware of a lot of these stories, so I'd be interested to see if they do drag him in front of a select committee, and because if he doesn't tell the truth there, they can get him for perjury. So if they do drag him in, he should be very, very careful, and he should tell us what he does know, what he doesn't know, and what he can and can't say, because he will hide under certain rules that allow him to not disclose information. But the fact is, they need to ask him, did he know about this 800k facility, and what did he tell Johnson? Is he okay with it? Ask him about his opinions on these specific things. This is genuinely madness. But when it comes to scandals, Trump is pretty bad, but I think Johnson is above that, because Johnson.
That's what I'm talking about. That's why he's the MVP. That's why he's the GOAT. The GOAT.
When it comes to scandals, this man is the GOAT. He's not even in Parliament and they're still leaking stories about him. Sorry, he's not even Prime Minister anymore. They're still leaking stories about him. He hasn't been Prime Minister for, I think, around 7 months. And they're still getting him. They're still leaking stories about him. What else was he involved in that we don't know? It's madness. That's why he's the GOAT. The GOAT of scandals. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And remember, when it comes to scandals, Johnson.
That's what I'm talking about.
He's the MVP.
That's why he's the MVP. That's why he's the GOAT. The GOAT.
Yeah. I'll catch you in the next one.